The beginning of the Great Patriotic War caught me not far from the town of Kovel, where our unit stood, about the first unequal fights with fascist invaders, about heavy days of retreat to the east to tell long. I will begin with those days when, after the reorganization of the unit, I was sent to the 13th Guards Division of General Rodimtsev. I was very happy that I got into the Guards unit. The first time I was in charge of combat supply in the 3rd Rifle Battalion of the 42nd Guards Regiment, commanded by Guards Colonel Yelin. In the summer of 1942, our division fought hard battles with the enemy, tearing towards Stalingrad. Our units inflicted great losses to the enemy, but Hitlerites still had superiority in forces and stubbornly climbed forward. In July, the division was withdrawn from the fighting. General Rodimtsev, with his staff, was already in Stalingrad. The fighting was going on in those days in the Donets and Don region. When we arrived in Stalingrad, we could not yet feel the breath of the approaching battle. The city lived its daily busy labor life. In a free hour, my friends and I walked along its beautiful streets, admired its buildings, new factories stretching along the bank of the Volga for many kilometers. I remembered with what joy in my native Valdai village of Krestovaya our collective farmers welcomed the new tractors STZ that had arrived at the MTS. Now I saw for myself the huge factory where they were manufactured. But in those days I had no idea that this famous plant, this city on the Volga, I would have to defend myself in cruel and long battles. After staying in Stalingrad for 3 days, we went up the Volga to Kamyshin. Here our division began to prepare for new battles. I was assigned to command a machine gun squad. The whole August was spent in training. From the front came unhappy news. Soon we learned that the fascists bombed Stalingrad several times. In the 10th days of September, enemy tanks broke through to the streets of this city. There was a rumor that in some places Hitlerites near the city went even to the Volga. Enemies on the Volga. These 3 words made our blood boil. We were burning with impatience to go into battle. No, the enemy should not cross the beautiful Volga, should not capture Stalingrad, never be this. September night on the alarm, our division moved by cars along the Volga coast to the south. By morning we were already in Malaya Akhtuba against Stalingrad. Above the huge city a gigantic glow was blazing. The waters of the Volga River were crimson with the glow of the fires. The rumbling was not silent for a minute. Airplanes were always hovering in the sky. The enemy artillery was continuously beating not only on the city, but also on the opposite bank of the Volga. Our cars went under this fire without stopping. At the wharf we quickly jumped out of the cars, and they immediately went to the rear. A boat with a barge came to the wharf, and we began to load. Apparently they were waiting for us on the other shore, because the crossing started in spite of daytime and heavy shelling. The boat moved away from the shore. Slowly we crossed the Volga. The shells were coming from in front and behind us. In the middle of the river there was an accident. Some cable coiled on the propeller of the boat, and we stopped. The fire of the enemies intensified. The commanders ordered to jump into the Volga and swim to the shore if necessary. I must confess that I cannot swim, and then, in the middle of a wide river, boiling from the bursts of shells and mines, I regretted it very much. But fortunately everything turned out safely. The barge broke away from the boat, and the current carried it down. An armoured boat caught up with us and picked us up. Once again we sailed to the rumbling battle, blazing city. I remembered this crossing of the Volga River for the rest of my life. Here, at last, is the Stalingrad shore. Quickly we jump on dry land. We're going up the bank. I didn't recognize the city. A month and a half ago its streets were decorated with beautiful buildings, and now in their place stood black, charred skeletons of houses. Many houses were burning. We walked through the smoky streets. Neither I nor the other fighters yet knew where the enemies were. In the first minutes it was thought that they were near the city and were trying to storm it. We are led by the company commander, Lieutenant Nomov. I followed the platoon commander, Lieutenant Boyko. I read the name of the street, Sunny. Now on it not only the sun, but also the sky is not visible. At the end of the street we see 3 policemen with rifles at the barricade. "Where are the fascists?" Senior Sergeant Cuke asks them. "Yes, in that street over there," answers one of the policemen. We could not believe it, but a machine gun burst, cutting through the windows of the first floor of the house along which we were sneaking, dispelled all doubts. Enemies in the streets of Stalingrad. It was hard to reconcile with this thought. We did not know that Hitler in these hours had already boastfully shouted that his army had taken Stalingrad. We, having entered the streets of the city, knew only one thing: the enemy will never take Stalingrad. This thought we lived, it led us into battle. We entered the battle 40 minutes after the landing in Stalingrad. Lieutenant Boyko's platoon went to beat the fascists out of one house they had captured. I, with my machine gunners, had to cover him. The impudent Hitlerites thought to throw us, the defenders of Stalingrad, into the Volga without difficulty. They miscalculated. From the very first minutes of the battle, we not only did not let them go further, but also began to beat them out of individual houses. Our platoon also captured the intended house. And at night I was ordered to capture one building built in the shape of the letter G. With a group of fighters, we silently crept up to this house, removed the sentry, killed the enemy soldiers and occupied the house. In the cellars we found a large number of inhabitants. They were transferred closer to the bank of the Volga to be later transferred to the other bank, and the house became the property of our 7th Company. For 3 days we kept defence in this house, until the Nazis demolished it with shells. But the cellar remained intact, and an important position was saved. At night, 2 fighters from the area captured by the enemy came crawling to us. Having checked who they were, we escorted them to the company commander. One of the fighters, with a tired, overgrown face, reported, "There, in the building of the commandant's office, our company is in an encircled battle with the Nazis. It needs ammunition, needs help to get out here." Lieutenant Normov contacted the command by phone. Soon the company commander calls me. 12 soldiers are you, for the chief will go to the rescue of the commandant's company. These 2 soldiers will also go with you as guides. It was my first sortie behind enemy lines, and I was understandably worried. In the second half of the night, through the yards, through the breaches in the houses, without going into the streets, crawled forward. The commandant's office was at the other end of the city. It was beginning to get light. I saw a small brick house. I decided to take a circular defence in it, and, having waited, to move on in the evening. We took a closer look at the cabin. No one comes in or out. We crawled to the window. I see someone lying on the bed. We decided to go in. We quietly opened the door and saw a wounded woman lying on the bed. She lifted herself up and screamed, "My God, it's ours." "So the fascists didn't take Stalingrad?" "That's right, they didn't," I answered. "And they never will." I positioned my men so that I could keep a circular surveillance. On the way to the house, in one place we were shelled, and we lost several men, including one of the guides. If now the Hitlerites discover us, it will be easy for them to blow up our brick house with shells. Suddenly one of the observers reports, "Comrade Sergeant, some woman entered the yard." "Don't shoot. If she comes to the door, let her in." This woman came to check on her wounded neighbour. When she saw us, she was also amazed. She wanted to leave, but I wouldn't let her go. Then she started crying. My children were left alone there. I took pity on her and repented afterwards. Just she went out, I see 3 Hitlerites running up to her, threatening her with machine guns. Then they went to the hut. We destroyed them with short bursts. Soon artillery fire fell on the house. It was impossible to stay here. The woman hid in the cellar, and we, noticing one of the nearby large houses, stealthily ran one by one into its cellar. The fascists, having destroyed the brick house, calmed down. The artillery fell silent. We spent the day in the cellar. At dusk we went on our way. A piece of shrapnel killed the second guide. What to do? I don't know the town. Luckily we came across an old man in one of the courtyards. We questioned him. He explained where to go. When we approached the commandant's office, we saw that the whole building was already occupied by the enemy. The remnants of the commandant's company must have broken through to their own before our approach. My group was thoroughly thinned out. We had to go back. It was unwise to go the same way. The enemies were undoubtedly looking for a group of Soviet fighters who had penetrated into their rear. I led my soldiers another way. It was a hard road full of dangers and surprises. In short fights we destroyed more than 40 fascists on the way. We were exhausted. We had not eaten anything for 3 days. We were terribly thirsty, but the water supply was destroyed. We crawled through cellars and yards all night. In the morning we got to our own people. We were already considered dead. The first thing we did was to drink water. We drank Volga water with pleasure. Combat ordered to give us a day's rest. I reported to him in detail about everything seen in the enemy rear. All this was written down in detail. So my first big reconnaissance mission was born. We climbed into the basement for a rest. Under the artillery music, I immediately fell asleep and woke up exactly 24 hours later. The house on the square on January 9th. The battalion commander, after my first sortie to the rear of the enemy, sent me more than once to scout separate houses to probe how fortified they were. But not for long I had a chance to be a scout. On September 27th, in the evening, called me to his company commander. "Comrade Pavlov, there is a matter." "Yes, Comrade Guards Lieutenant?" "Do you see that 4-story house over there facing January 9th Square?" "Yes, Comrade Guards Lieutenant." "That house is a very favourable position. We must scout if there are many Germans there. You'll do that tonight. How many men do you need?" "3 will be enough." "It's up to you." I chose a machine gunner from my squad, Chernigolov, and 2 more brave guys, Glushenko and Alexandrov. Before darkness fell, we watched the house and found that there was no fire from it, but we noticed that enemy tanks were approaching the building from the side of the square. As darkness fell at about 9 o'clock in the evening, we crawled forward. It was not far to the house, about 150 to 200 meters. But what meters they were! Hitlerites, without ceasing, were firing at our positions. Pressing as close to the ground as possible, we slowly moved towards the house. We don't have much time, because soon the moon should rise. In front crawls Alexandrov, behind him I, the third, moves Glushenko. Chernigolov stayed for the time being at the shed, from which we were watching the house during the day. He is our liaison and received an order from me. If we get there safely, then he will crawl to us. If we fail, he will call reinforcements by signals. Meter by meter we crawl along the streetcar track to the house. Not for a minute, do not stop pounding enemy machine guns. At times we freeze on the ground, and then we can clearly hear bullets singing above our ears like bumblebees. As soon as the machine guns are silent for a moment, we start crawling again. Later I found 2 slashes on my overcoat, bullet marks. In the afternoon we found out that the house has 4 entrances. We are heading for the first entrance. A few more languid minutes, and drenched with sweat, we press against the cold wall of the house. We catch our breath and wait for Chernigolov. On one our traces he crawls more confidently, and soon joins our group. It's time to act. We listen. The house is quiet. On my order, Alexandrov remains outside at the entrance, and Glushenko, having entered there, observes the stairs leading to the upper floors. Chernigolov and I go down to the basement. I put my ear to the door. Muffled Russian speech comes out. Probably residents from the upper floors, I decide. With a strong push I open the door, burst into the cellar with Chernigolov. I turn on the flashlight, and slipping a thin beam on a group of women and old men, I say, "Good evening." From surprise and amazement in the first minute all are silent. Waking up, some woman says, "How did you get here?" "There are fascists in the house." "We know. That's why we came," I answer. "Where are they?" "In the second entrance, on the first floor." "And not here." "We haven't seen them." Still, caution requires a check. Glushenko is now watching the basement, and I with Chernigolov survey the entrance floor by floor. Empty, trashed apartments. Cold wind walks through the rooms. We make sure that there are really no Germans in the first entrance. We go out to the courtyard. The edges of the clouds are already silvering. The moon will soon rise. We must act faster. We sneak along the walls to the second entrance. Alexandrov and Glushenko are still on guard. I order Glushenko to watch the basement, and with Chernigolov quietly climb a few steps to the first floor. In front of us are 2 doors leading to the apartments. I lean against the door and listen. There is a German conversation in the apartment. Chernigolov invites me to listen at the second door. Here, too, I hear fragments of German phrases. The doors are slightly ajar. Our weapons consisted of machine guns, knives and grenades. All our pockets were filled with limonka. I whispered to Chernigolov the plan of action. I open the door of one apartment, he another. We throw 3 grenades and then break into the rooms. The unexpected rattle of our grenades breaks the silence in the house. We rush into the rooms, full of smoke and dust, shooting from automatic rifles. In the back of the room I distinguish windows, through which I can see the square, lit by the rising moon. 3 figures are fleeing across the square, screaming they are enemy soldiers wounded by us. 3 killed Hitlerites are lying on the floor near the windows. We quickly survey the upper floors. There is no one here. The cue for the basement. I open the door and with a machine gun at the ready I enter the basement. In the depth of the cellar there is something like a table. A kaganet flickers faintly on it. It is full of people, the same tenants from the upper floors. Again, surprised exclamations and joy of people frightened by the explosions. There are questions. How did you get here? There are fascists above us. They were here, but they floated away. Now here we are, Soviet fighters. I look around and recognize a familiar face among the tenants. San Instructor Kalinin, why are you here? I asked. I was dealing with the wounded and got stuck, replies the orderly. I am interested in whether there are still Hitlerites in the house. I find out that their group was only in the second entrance and was shelling the square from here. They say that there are also residents in the cellar of the third entrance. Still, I decide to continue the reconnaissance. We thoroughly examined all the apartments and attics of the third and fourth entrances. I am convinced that the house is now in our hands. I remembered that the company commander sent us only to scout the house, and the order to seize the house was not. We can say, overfulfilled the order, not only scouted but also seized the house. What should we do next? To leave it without fighters means to give the enemy a chance to come back here. I make a decision to stay and defend the house. There are 4 of us. I set up the posts. Chernigolov takes a position at the window, where Hitlerites used to be, and observes the square. Glushenko watches the entrances. Alexandrov watches the rear side. One trouble, not enough ammunition. Nothing. I'll write a report to the commander and we'll get ammunition and help in men. But who will deliver the report? It's risky to stay with just the 3 of us. After thinking it over, I decided to send San Instructor Kalinin to the commander. I wrote in the report that as a result of reconnaissance our group managed to capture the house, but it's a bit tight with ammunition and food. I'm waiting for further instructions. I hand the report to Kalinin and order. The commander himself in his hands, and quickly. As soon as the San Instructor came out of the second entrance, as Hitlerites began a strong shelling of the house. They've already reported to their superiors. I thought about the surviving Nazis who escaped from our house. We had to take temporary shelter in the basement. But as soon as the shelling stopped, we took up our posts again. Suddenly I heard Chernigolov's voice. Comrade Sergeant, a moment. I go up to him, and he shows me 3 shadows wandering across the square and asks, "Shall I take it off?" Take it off. A short cue kills 3 Hitlerites. Still, I warn all my garrison, do not waste cartridges and grenades. There will be a lot of temptations, but for now ammunition should be saved in case of an enemy counterattack. The inhabitants of the second entrance cooked some chowder and treated us. At that time the shelling started again. Artillery and mortar raids on the house. The enemies were almost every half an hour. It is unlikely that they thought that we only 4 of us were defending the house. The enemy decided, apparently to wear us out during the night with shelling and in the morning to undertake a counterattack. Combat is silent as they say, no answer, no hello already lightning. The fascists made such a raid that the whole house was shaking from the explosions, somewhere the ceilings collapsed. But the building is strong, and it is not easy to destroy. But now the artillery is silent. Chernigolov shouts to me. They're coming. I run up to him and see that a small chain of Hitlerites is crawling across the square. We let them get closer and shot them with automatic rifles. Some of them remained lying down. Other daredevils crawled into their holes on the opposite side of the square. I climbed into the attic and looked at the mill, where in the basement is located in the control room of our company. Maybe they will put up some sign for me. I can't see anything. It upset me. It cannot be that the commander did not respond to my report. Didn't the instructor die getting there with the report? While I was worried about the fate of my report, at the battalion command post, as I later learned, the following happened. At the CP came the regiment commander, Guards Colonel Yelin. Combat reports to him that sent a group to scout the house on the square on January 9th. How many men went? Asked Yelin. 4. Only 4. What have you done? They must have been shot at once. Combat did not find something to answer, because for a day we have not heard from us. Suddenly, Kalinin came into the basement, barely catching his breath. Seeing the colonel, the orderly asked, Comrade Guards Colonel, permission to address? Yes, sir. I'm from Guards Sergeant Pavlov. Pavlov? That's right, from the house where Pavlov took up the defence. Rejoiced, the commander took the report, read it, and turned to the regiment commander. Comrade Guards Colonel. Allow me to report that Guards Sergeant Pavlov took the house without losses and now holds the defence there. He reports that there is no ammunition. The regiment commander was pleased too. Very good. Well done, well done. Immediately send them reinforcements, ammunition, food, everything they need. It's an impregnable bastion. We sat in our house and kept watch. An hour after Kalinin left, Glushenko gave me a signal. Comrade Guards Sergeant, from the side of the Volga are approaching 3. Be careful. There's no way anyone from the Volga can appear there. Close the door. We let them come as close as possible. We see it's our machine gunners. Greetings from the commander and the Guards Colonel. They say, having jumped into our cellar, we thought you were dead. You bury us early, friends, I answer. The enemy hasn't even cast bullets for us yet. And I was glad to hear that the replenishment had arrived and ammunition had appeared. In 15 minutes, 3 more men came from the battalion, then another and another. By midnight, I solemnly announced under the rumble of German artillery, our regiment has arrived. Now we have a powerful garrison, 18 soldiers. We had more weapons. Now at our disposal was a machine gun Maxim, which we immediately installed in the basement. From here, the commander of the machine gun crew, Guards Senior Sergeant Voronov, could keep the whole area under fire. Arrived to us 3 armoured gunners with rifles PTR. There was enough ammunition and machine gun discs in reserve, and it was also happy that we were no longer cut off from the battalion. The same night, the communicators stretched a line, and in the basement of the second entrance, where the headquarters of our small garrison was located, there was a telephone. Our call sign was Mayak. The next morning, Hitlerites again rained a hail of shells on our house. It seemed that they wanted to wipe out the building in which they had lost a good position. And though our house was badly riddled, still it stood a strong bastion, an impregnable fortress. The fire raids on the house did not cease, but now the enemy also began to receive from us retaliatory blows. At night I called the company commander. Says Mayak. I'm listening, answered the company commander. We have a good position for snipers. All right, I'll send. That same night a sniper came to us. During the day, as soon as the shelling was over, he went up to the attic. During the first day, he killed about 24 Hitlerites. Voronov's machine gun also worked hard. Hitlerites who were against us had to run across the street to get from house to house. At least one fascist had to appear in the firing zone, as Voronov from the cellar or sniper, who was sitting in the attic, destroyed him. The next night the Nazis dug a trench between the houses occupied by them. The trench was deep. The fire did not reach those who were running over, and our machine gunners grumbled with annoyance. Now our company mortar could work here, Voronov told me. I liked the machine gunner's idea. I called the company commander about it, and the next night company mortars were delivered to us. Our mortars were so skillful that their mines lay in the very trench. Again, the enemy did not live from the fire. Hitlerites went mad. Hour by hour their fire attacks became more and more fierce. Several times we had to put out fires. One heavy landfill even flew into the basement of the first entrance. Despite the hurricane fire, our house stood and smashed the enemy with lead and metal. Several times Hitlerites tried to bomb from the air. But it was not so easy for them to do it in the daytime. Our anti-aircraft gunners gave such a fire during the raids that there was no clean place from the bursts in the sky. Then they decided to bomb our house at night. We hear enemy bombers howling in the darkness above us. The enemies, who were sitting opposite to us to point the pilots to the target, started to launch green rockets in our direction. Another minute, 2 more, and the bombs would pile up on us. I remember that we have rockets somewhere. Alexandrov. Hurry up the rocket launcher. I shout at the top of my voice. The soldier gives it to me. I quickly load the rocket launcher with a cartridge with a green border and press the trigger. The rocket, shining brightly, describes an arc and falls on the houses occupied by the enemy. I continue firing. This fireworks over the square on January 9th was remembered for a long time. Our rockets confused Hitler's pilots. Their bombs fell on houses occupied by their own enemy units. Only one bomb exploded near our house, slightly damaging a corner. What a feast we gave the fascists, with thunder and lightning, with illumination. The soldiers joked. Later Hitlerites tried to point their planes at our house with rockets of other colours, but we always confused their maps. Day by day we kept defence. Day by day we repelled all Hitlerites' attempts to approach our house. We exterminated 12 of them after another. It was not easy, but we remembered the words of our division commander, General Rodimtsev, who said that we, guardsmen, should stand in Stalingrad to the death. We tried to improve our defence. We brought food and water from the Volga River at night. Our water was worth its weight in gold. It was used with the strictest economy. We carried it in thermoses. It was not an easy task to crawl from our house to the mill with a thermos on your back, and then go down to the Volga and crawl back. The area between our house and the mill was fiercely shelled. Several of our comrades died not in the house we were defending, but on the way. We, having settled into our fortress, dug a deep human-sized trench stretching 200 metres to the battalion's CP. This trench helped us to evacuate to the rear, to the other side of the Volga River, the civilians who were rescued in cellars. One night the commander of the regiment guards, Colonel Yelin, came to us. He inspected all the floors, all our posts and firing positions. We liked it. With what business-like manner he examined every nook and cranny of our house. Having finished the inspection of the house, the guard's colonel went down the stairs filled with rubble and lime into the basement of the second entrance, where our KP was located. Hitlerites will still try to burn the house somehow, said the guard's colonel. And we, comrade guard's colonel, will somehow try not to burn, I jokingly answered. Remember, comrades, it is not so much the house that is important for our defence as a favourable position for defence. Even if the house will burn, we cannot leave here. Think how to ensure that. In the dim flicker of the smokestack, I looked at the regimental commander. He was looking at me, at our soldiers. And in that look everyone could read, I know, my dears, I am sure that you will not leave here. I believe in you, but think and do so that there will be no unnecessary losses. We thought and did. In front of the house was a cemented gasoline storage tank. A good shelter, but how to get to it if every metre is shot through? We decided to dig an underground passage. It was hard work. It had to be done discreetly. The slightest carelessness could derail the whole plan. The underground passage had to be dug by the forces of our garrison. There was almost no opportunity to rest. A soldier changed from his combat post and immediately went to dig a tunnel, and then again to sing, to fight. We coped with this case too. Behind the house, about 30 meters away, was the hatch of a water tunnel. We dug an underground passage here too. That's how we set up our reserve positions. They served us well. As soon as the enemy opened fire on the house, only the men on duty remained at the posts, and everyone else went into the shelter. The shelling stopped, and our whole garrison was in the house again mowing down the Hitlerites who tried to attack our position. There was not a day that the Nazis left our house alone. Our garrison, which did not give them a step further, was worse than an eyesore. Day by day they intensified the shelling, apparently deciding to incinerate the house. Once the German artillery was firing for a whole day without a break. From the outside our house must have looked very scary. There was not a living place on it, as they say. And yet it stood formidable and impregnable. There were tense minutes when the explosions made the whole house shake, and one of the soldiers would say, "What kind of a house is this?" "It's a fortress." "This is a real, good Soviet house, as strong as our people," I answered. Still, the enemy managed to collapse one of the walls, which was closer to their batteries. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the enemy fired several thousand shells at this wall. "Nothing, friends, we have 3 more walls," said the black head, and added jokingly, "a house like a house, only now with a little ventilation." The soldiers laughed at this joke. By this time there was no roof on the house. Riddled with shrapnel, it was torn off by strong explosive waves. But even in this difficult time, as soon as there were quiet moments, we dreamed of the days when the war would end, when the house, which had become unusually close and dear to each of us, would once again take its former appearance. I remember in one of these conversations someone expressed a doubt. Would they rebuild such a ruin? They will dismantle it into bricks and build a new one. What a ruin it is, offended Glushenko. Look how much our house is worth and how much more will stand. I do not know what happened to Glushenko, whether he survived after the wound received in those days. Where is he now, my glorious comrade in arms? I would like to inform him that I visited Stalingrad after the war and saw our house. You were right, dear Glushenko, the house was not dismantled, but restored and stands in the reviving Stalingrad as a monument to Russian soldiers' fortitude, yours, Glushenko, and the rest of the guardsmen of our small garrison. But I'll tell you about that afterwards. We defended our house, enduring monstrous shelling, suffocating in smoke and dust. Days of battle were replaced by others, and the enemy could not advance a meter. And a holiday came to our street. The everyday life of the Stalingrad defense is known to everyone from the stories of those who in this terrible battle defended the Soviet stronghold on the Volga, and from descriptions in magazines and books. All our experiences are well conveyed in the story Days and Nights by Konstantin Simonov. It tells about one house, whose garrison repulsed fierce attacks of Hitlerites till the end. Of course, I know only about how we defended our house. There may have been other such houses, but when I read the story, much described in it is very close to what I had to experience myself, and especially the enormous tension of continuous combat, which is unthinkable to endure, if not inspired by the great purpose and selfless heroism of our fighters. We lost count of the fire raids and attacks, but still remembered one October day when the Nazis undertook a particularly fierce attack with tanks. Our observers reported that infantry was coming after the tanks. To the attic. I ordered a group of fighters. The fighters who took up positions in the attic were armed with hand machine guns and automatic rifles. We quickly stopped the tanks with fire from armor-piercing. One of the hit tanks spun and stopped on the spot. 2 others crawled to the middle of the square, but unable to withstand our fire, went back. On my signal, at that moment the gunners from the attic opened fire. They cut off Hitler's infantry from the tanks and mowed it down with long bursts. The attack was thwarted. The enemy, in retaliation again, dropped a barrage of artillery fire on the house. November 7th came the day of the 25th anniversary of the Great October Socialist Revolution. Amazing silence stood on this day in Stalingrad. The enemies, apparently, were waiting for any major actions on our side and did not rush into attacks. We, in turn, believed that the fascists would prevent us from celebrating our great holiday, and we watched the enemy with increased vigilance. We were so accustomed to the infernal rumble of the unceasing battle that we always remembered how unusually quiet it was in Stalingrad that day. In the evening we received a greeting from our division commander, General Rodimtsev. He congratulated our garrison on the holiday and thanked us for our combat service. They also brought us a festive dinner. We filled the soldiers' mugs. I stood up and addressed the soldiers. Comrades, today is a great holiday. 25 years ago our country became Soviet. Here we are now living in one close and friendly soldier's family. None of us thought that in Stalingrad there is such a house where we will meet the 25th anniversary of October. What brought us here from different parts of the country? We defend here our native Soviet power, which was proclaimed by our great leaders Lenin and Stalin. We defend here the happiness and freedom of our motherland. Today, as in all the days of defense, our thoughts and feelings are with dear comrade Stalin. The city we are defending bears his great name. We have no telegraph here to send him greetings from the group of Stalingraders defending the house in the square on January 9th. But I think that Comrade Stalin knows, even without our telegram, that the fighters of Stalingrad send him their battle greetings and swear to carry out his order to the end. For Stalin, for the Soviet motherland, for Stalingrad, for our victory. I saw how smoky, overgrown soldiers' faces lit up with joyful smiles, and in the basement of the half-destroyed house rang hurrah. This friendly hurrah apparently frightened the fascists. It seemed to them that an attack was beginning. The silence was broken by the crackle of machine guns, the howling of 6-barrel mortars, the rumble of bursting mines and shells. The fire soon subsided. Our sentries vigilantly kept their watch, and all the soldiers resting in the basement during that short hour of calm were quietly talking among themselves, remembering how and where they celebrated this holiday before the war, talking about their native places. Here, among the charred and collapsed buildings, where death looked us in the eyes every moment, our native places from where we came here to the immortal city on the Volga lived brightly in our hearts, in our thoughts. I remembered my native village, our blue forests, azure lakes, fields blue with blooming flax. I remembered my old mother. Anisia Igorovna, if you could look at your Yasha now, I grinned to myself. The last time, just before the war, when I came to visit my relatives, she had admired my brave appearance, my new, perfectly fitted uniform. And now I didn't look so attractive. How many sleepless nights we had spent, not getting out of our cotton coats. Everything was frayed, soaked through with cinders and brick dust. And in spite of everything, on this festive day we dreamed of the time when we would finish the war and return to our relatives. We dreamed about it out loud. We had people gathered from all parts of our great country. Sabgaida and Glashenko are Ukrainians. They often remembered their native steppes. Abkhazian Sukba could not speak indifferently about gardens and plantations of his native collective farm. Katsabi, come after the war to us near Batum. I will treat you with such wine and oranges that you will always remember. He was saying, waving his hands with excitement and shining his beautiful dark eyes. Uzbek Turganov and Tatar Ramazanov joined the conversation, inviting their friends to their homes. All of us became twins, close and dear to each other during this time. Many of those who met this holiday in Stalingrad gave their lives for the motherland, which they loved with a deep, inexpressible love. Dear, wonderful people. We recovered our spirits and even more persistently repelled Hitler's attacks when a newspaper with Comrade Stalin's report of November 6, 1942 was delivered to us from the battalion. There will be a holiday on our street. We repeated the historical words of the leader. They encouraged us in the hours of the most terrible enemy bombardments and attacks, and still our house on the square of January 9th was impregnable for Hitlerites. At that time our house already served as a landmark on maps and was called Pavlov's house. This name was fixed for it from the first day, when we captured it. The first to call it so was Kalinin, a San instructor who came running with a report. Then Colonel Yalin, interested in the situation, called the battalion and asked, "Well, how is the house of Pavlov?" Since then our house under this name appeared in the reports. Later I learned that in Pravda was printed an essay about our garrison, and it was also called Pavlov's house. I did not know about it, and when I heard the name myself, I did not immediately guess that it was about our house. And this name has stuck and lives to this day. But my soldier's honor requires me to say that this house was not only Pavlov's house, but also the house of Alexandrov, Chernogolov, Glushenko, Sukba, Stepanoshvili, and all our garrison, who, without sparing their lives, carried out the orders of the command and stood to the death on their position. In the post-holiday days we lived with a premonition of great changes. From the very first days when our division landed on the Stalingrad shore, we all had no doubt that Stalingrad would never be taken by the Nazis. Our guardsman said, "There is no land beyond the Volga for us, and no matter how much metal and lead the enemy rained down on us, he could not break the unshakable spirit of Stalingrad residents." The enemies were so close to our house that in the hours of calm we could hear the sounds of their gramophone coming from the nearest house. Sometimes some fascist thug, having drunk some schnapps for courage, would shout to us in broken Russian, "Hey Vi, soon we'll drown you in the Volga." "Liar," shouted one of ours. "Guardsmen don't burn in fire, and they don't drown in water." Come on, guys, I appeal to the soldiers. Let's give there a light, and such that this fascist would forever remember our song, "Where is this street? Where is this house?" And finally we waited for that November morning, when our artillery rumbled with unprecedented, amazing force. Thousands of barrels spewed fire and death on the enemy positions. We had never heard such a powerful rumble during the entire time of the Stalingrad defense. The soldiers of our garrison, who were free from duty at the posts, climbed up to the attic on half-destroyed ladders. "Well, soldiers, a holiday has begun on our street," joyfully exclaimed Sabgaida. "They are giving the fascists heat, they are. More hot," he exclaimed, as if our cannoners beyond the Volga could hear him. The majestic boom of our guns, the formidable singing of hundreds of Katyushas so excited us that we, daring to rise to our full height in the attic of our house. The enemy could neither see us nor see us, and yet, as if dazed by the unexpectedness of our attack, they were silent for the first time. And we had a good view of the left bank of the Volga. Here, wherever you looked, there was a solid wall of smoke, every second cut through by thousands of purple lightning. My heart beat joyfully at the sight of this powerful barrage of fire. Thick clouds of smoke and dust enveloped the enemy positions. So, as a precaution, I ordered everyone to go down into the cellar again and intensified my observation. When the guns on the left bank of the Volga became silent, we listened excitedly to the artillery murmuring somewhere far away from the city in several places. "So ours are advancing on a wide front," I said to my friends. "Maybe we will soon say goodbye to our home too." Each of us was sure that if the offensive at Stalingrad began, then not today, tomorrow, we will go to the Nazis. For more than 50 days and nights our garrison was defending the house. We have survived hundreds of artillery shelling, bombing and attacks. In fact, all these 58 days we never left the battle. But each of us dreamed of another battle to go forward, on the offensive, from the Volga to the Oder. During November 19th, the political officer came to us 3 times. Gathering people, he made a message that deeply excited us. "Comrades, your service was not wasted. While we here, defending Stalingrad, constrained and exhausted selected enemy divisions, our command, by order of Comrade Stalin, was able to concentrate powerful reserves here, near Stalingrad. This morning our troops north and south of Stalingrad went on the offensive. In both directions they broke through the enemy defences, and our tankers rushed into the breakthrough. When the explosion of joyful exclamations subsided a little, machine gunner Voronov asked, "Comrade political officer, and when will we also go forward?" "There will be an order, comrades, and we will go forward. We'll definitely go forward." At night we were informed by phone from the company that our troops to the south and north of Stalingrad successfully continue the offensive. And will try to give the enemy more heat. I declared on behalf of the garrison of our house, and although the day after tomorrow he fell on our positions with terrible fire, we were in a festive mood. All of us felt now many times stronger and knew that the Nazis in Stalingrad the end. We were always wondering how the offensive was going. And when the political officer came to us again and told us the joyful news that our troops, which had crashed in 2 huge wedges into the enemy positions, had united in Kalach, that the huge enemy army at Stalingrad was surrounded and taken in the steel pincers of our troops, we had a particularly joyful day. We hugged each other and congratulated each other. Soon it was our turn to go forward. On the night of November 25th, we learned that we would attack. In the morning, after artillery preparation, we left our dear wounded house and crawled across the square forward. We were ordered to knock Hitlerites out of the house, which stood nearby. We went on the offensive already in the ranks of our native 7th Company. After a 2-month break, we rejoined it. Minefields were left behind. A few more moments and we block the house. Soldiers rush into the building. The battle is raging in the stairwells. Grenades fly from the street into the windows. At that moment something hit me in the leg. Unbearable pain burned my whole body. I fell not far from the house. Gathering the last strength, I crawled close to its wall. Here my consciousness left me. I woke up on the bank of the Volga. My leg was bandaged, but on the gauze I could see a bright red stain of blood still oozing from the wound. It was noisy at this hour at the crossing. Caught in a noose, the enemy were frantic. On this day, in order to break our communication with the left bank, they had subjected the crossing to the heaviest fire. We were protected from the fire by the coastal slope. Here, on the bank, I saw the machine gunner Voronov from our garrison, who was so eagerly rushing with his Maxim to the offensive. He too was lying on a stretcher. Raising himself up, met his eyes. Voronov recognized me. "Where did it hurt you?" I asked him. He weakly gestured at his stomach and tiredly closed his eyes. He was carried to the car. The seriously wounded were evacuated first. When the orderlies lifted the stretcher, Voronov opened his eyes again and nodded to me faintly with a completely white face. "Goodbye, Voronov. You'll get better. We'll meet again." But never again did I see this calm, fearless soldier, so dreaming of the days of the offensive. It did not happen to him, a glorious machine gunner of our garrison, who survived the most difficult period of the defense of Stalingrad, to take together with the guardsmen of Stalingrad, Rostov and Odessa, to cross the border and finish his combat journey in the defeated Berlin. The orderlies helped me to load on the car. Here we are on the left bank of the Volga. I turn around and on the other bank I see Stalingrad. Clouds of smoke hovering over it. Our stormtroopers are passing over the city with a formidable roar. It seems that they are about to be caught by the black hulks of burned houses, by lonely protruding chimneys. Here they make an approach, and the sounds of bomb bursts reach even here. Stalingrad. Our dear city fighter. Our dear home on January 9th. I didn't know then that one of our guardsmen had painted huge letters on the shrapnel-ravaged wall. This house was defended by Guards Sergeant Yakov Fedotovich Pavlov. With full right this unknown friend could write here the names of Chernogolov, Alexandrov, Voronov, Glushenko, Sabgaida, Stepanoshvili, and all other soldiers of our garrison who fought in the house until the very last day. We defended here our motherland, our happiness, confident that no matter how hard it was for us, we would win. Our car starts, and I, having overcome the pain, I rise up on my elbows and through the open back of the ambulance look at the city and mentally say goodbye to it. I have only a few things to add. After being discharged from the hospital, I tried to get back to my native Guards division, but I didn't have to. By that time the Stalingraders had gone far to the west. I was sent to a reserve regiment and soon, as a frontline soldier, was sent to an artillery unit. After training, we went to the front. The battle for Stettin was the last battle in which I participated. In the same days Berlin fell, and the war ended with our great victory. Soon I received a leave of absence and went to my native village Krestovaya, Valdai district, Novgorod region. It is clear to every frontline soldier with what excitement I was going home, how warmly my fellow villagers welcomed me. Of course, my mother was most happy. When I returned from leave, the regiment commander called me and said, "Go to headquarters, you are wanted by General Chukov." I went to the town where the headquarters was. I went to the right place. Adjutant reported about me to the general. During my stay in Stalingrad, I never once had a chance to see the famous commander of the 62nd Army, which included our Guards division, but I heard a lot about him, about his fearlessness and courage. And now, 3 years later, I am standing in front of the commander. "Comrade Colonel General, Guards Petty Officer Pavlov has appeared on your orders." The general stood up and greeted me. "So it was your house in Stalingrad?" Chuikov asked. "I did not build it, only occupied it defense from September 27th to November 25th, 1942. "How long you were carried on the waves, until you arrived on our shores," said the general. "I fought, Comrade General." "I see. And not badly, it turns out," smiled the general, looking at my orders. "I tried to fight in the Stalingrad way, Comrade General," I answered. The Colonel General asked me about the Stalingrad battles, about the commanders, about my further military life. "Well, all right, rest for now, Petty Officer." For a few days I lived in the security company of the Army headquarters. Then I was summoned to the General's office again. "I'm in the Commander's office again." He stands up and says, "Guards Junior Lieutenant Pavlov." Maybe I misheard. I'm wearing a petty officer's epaulettes. But Vasily Ivanovich Chuikov, not paying attention to my embarrassment, continued. "On behalf of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, I present you with the Gold Star of the Hero of the Soviet Union and the Order of Lenin." The general, the illustrious hero of the Stalingrad defense, shook my hand and immediately congratulated me on my promotion to officer in the Soviet Army. "I serve the Soviet Union," I answered. They found out in distant Stalingrad that I was alive. I received letters. Women, pioneers, demobilized soldiers. And in almost every letter was an invitation, "Come and see the city," which you defended, and we are now successfully restoring. This was my dream too. Soon, together with a major from a frontline newspaper, I went to Stalingrad. Here we are in the legendary city covered with forests. Heading for the familiar square on January 9th, I look at our house and don't recognize it. It is no longer that half-collapsed house, wounded and tormented, as I remembered it for all my life. It has become a beautiful, bright house again, with glass, with doors, with a roof, with everything that a good house should have. The famous inscription with my name on it is carefully preserved on the wall. Next to it is another inscription. The house was restored by Alexandra Maximovna Cherkasova from Stalingrad. This heroic woman did not leave the city during the hard days. She organized a brigade of wives of frontline soldiers and started to restore her native town. And the first house they restored was the Pavlov house. Stalingrad is the city of world glory, won in cruel battles with the White Guards and interventionists during the Civil War, and in even more severe and cruel battles during the patriotic war of the Soviet people with the Nazi invaders. Every inch of Stalingrad land is abundantly watered with the blood of courageous soldiers, defenders of the city, who withstood the onslaught of a strong and insidious enemy. The glorious feats of the defenders of Stalingrad have gone down in history as an example of selfless heroism and courage. Every street and square, factory shops, residential buildings, gardens and parks were places of unprecedented battles. The Soviet people and all advanced mankind with deep gratitude glorify the heroes who saved the world from Hitler's hordes. From the first days, as soon as the last shots of the Great Battle of Stalingrad sounded out, the whole country came to the aid of Stalingraders. The restoration of the hero city began. From the ashes and ruins rise the hulls of factories, built landscaped residential areas, schools, hospitals, theatres, new highways and streets are created. Squares are decorated with majestic public and cultural buildings. The war turned into a pile of ruins and all the buildings on one of the largest squares of the city defense square, where in 1942 a heroic group of soldiers under the command of Sergeant Pavlov in one of the residential buildings, steadfastly repelled the onslaught of superior enemy forces. The brave warriors withstood and won. Patriots of the city first of all undertook to restore this house, keeping the name of Sergeant Pavlov. Now on the square of combat soldiers' glory a great construction is underway, and it will be one of the largest monuments in the city. The plan of restoration and reconstruction of this area provides for the following. The Defense Square is the beginning of the parade part of the avenue named after Comrade Stalin, which will connect it with the central square, the Square of Fallen Fighters, and the Alley of Heroes. The street named after the 13th Guards Division is being expanded and improved. This street will connect Communist Street, Defense Square, and the parade embankment, from which will be built stairs and exits to the river. Pavlov's house, standing in the center of the square, is the main building around which the development and improvement of the square is organized. New residential buildings are now being built on the right and left sides of the Pavlov house. They will be connected to the end of Pavlov's house, facing the square by two semicircular walls with granite bas-reliefs and bronze inscriptions, telling about the great feat of the glorious patriots. At the end of Pavlov's house, faced with granite slabs, there will be a bas-relief of Comrade Stalin, the organizer and inspirer of the victories of the Soviet people. In front of the end wall, closer to the middle of the square, a monument is being erected, a bronze figure of a Soviet soldier on a granite pedestal. This is a monument from the citizens of the city to the defenders of Stalingrad. On the same line, on the edges of the square, are set granite signs marking the line of the front edge of the defense. On the opposite side of the square, a majestic building with a large theatre hall, cinema, library, recreation rooms and sports facilities will be built. At the corner of the Defense Square and the avenue named after Comrade Stalin in 1951 will be built a building of the Forestry Technical School. The entire Defense Square is being asphalted and landscaped. Significant works are supposed to be carried out on further improvement and equipping of apartments in Pavlov's house. The yards around the house will be turned into a beautiful flowering garden. Behind Pavlov's house, closer to the Volga River, there is a dilapidated building of the former mill. This place is preserved as a historical reserve and will be a living witness to the brutal battle that took place here. Around the ruins, the entire area of the reserve is being landscaped. The bronze plaques installed at the entrance to the reserve will bear inscriptions about the glorious exploits of the soldiers of the 13th Guards Division. Not far from the reserve, on the Embankment Boulevard, a granite monument is being erected to mark the place of the command post of General Rodimtsev, the commander of the legendary 13th Guards Division. There, at the very bank of the Volga, on the stone wall will be reproduced in bronze letters the inscription: "Here stood Rodimtsev's guardsmen. Having withstood, we defeated death." The whole territory around the wall with the historical inscription will be landscaped. Beautiful granite stairs, asphalted approaches with rows of perennial trees and lighting will be part of this monument. This is how our people commemorate the historical events of the Great Stalingrad Battle.